Geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and they're Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing, now in a store near you. I'm John Bonos of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic.
Would you say we're presented or the show is presented?
The show is presented.
Because you theoretically could be presented by beer, like powered by beer. Dude, I've always said that.
That'd be fueled by Black Stack, which I also am, actually,
right.
Truth be told.
That's what I'm kind of getting
I
at.
have a fridge full of Black Stack beer.
And a gut full of it, too, probably.
But there are several, I would think, beat reporters who could be fueled by Black Stack Brewing.
Yeah, I'm pretty much...
I have absolutely received texts from Phil Miller from Black Stack Brewing, so I know that...
That's how we're going to draw him back on the show. Hi, everyone. It's still the All-Star break. The Twins have an extra day off, which is useful for them, but annoying for everyone else.
Yeah, I'm not annoyed by it.
Well, okay. You're not
I like having the day off, especially because the room party is tonight, so I wouldn't be able to watch the game much anyway. So,
okay. Well, I'm glad they planned the All-Star break around you and K-Fan.
Exactly.
The Twins are still sitting at 54-42.
Yes.
They begin a series against Milwaukee at home Saturday night.
Just a two-gamer series.
It'll be Pablo Lopez game 1, Joe Ryan game 2. They officially announced that.
The reason that's so weird is because, right now the way the 162-game schedule works is you've got 4 games versus your National League rival. The Brewers are the National League rival, and it's usually a 2-2 split. Twins had the first 2 games at Milwaukee. It was their second series of the year right after their opening series versus Kansas City, and now these are the second 2 games.
It'll change next year, though. They just released the schedule.
Oh, really?
Yesterday. They get 6 games against Milwaukee, 2 3-game weekend series.
How are they undoing? Where are they getting those other 2 games from? Do you know? Okay, all right. I did not notice that when I took a look at the schedule.
Whatever.
What I looked at from the schedule is that the Twins finish their season next year in Philadelphia. That's their last 3 games of the season, which is going to be a tough series to do well. You don't want to have to win games in Philadelphia.
I mean, who knows?
Who knows?
A lot can change by next year.
Sure.
But yeah, I know everybody's been clamoring for a weekend series.
I hear you are under a
against
little
the Brewers.
pressure to go on a road trip and follow the Twins.
Except if my leg is amputated by then, I don't think it's really going to be that much pressure, you know?
And I'm not saying pressure from the Athletic. I'm saying pressure from the Duchess.
Yeah, the real athlete. She did one of those like years ago, ancestry things or whatever.
Yeah.
And one part of the report said that she comes from elite power athletes. I swear to God it said that. So she told me that, which was a mistake to tell me that. And so now anytime athlete is mentioned or power or elite, I go, hey, it's one of yours.
What is an elite power athlete?
I don't know.
Is that like a weightlifting? Is it shot put?
Like I think, whatever Eastern European, generations ago, it was like, elite power athlete.
Oh, I'm totally leading into that one.
So I'll be like, hey, it's one of yours.
I'm
Elite
going to
power
have some
athlete.
fun with that.
Anyway, the Twins are on pace for 91 wins. They have the best record in the American League since the 7-13 start. They are 5 games ahead of this same point last year.
Yeah.
However, they are 4.5 games behind the Cleveland Guardians right now, which is the biggest difference in this season. I think we've talked a little bit over the last few weeks how it doesn't seem like they've been as successful as they actually have been, particularly since this bad first 20 games. And the reason for that is just context. It's your environment. And that's so much of everything is like if Cleveland had the same record that Cleveland had at this same point last year, or let's take it a step further, if the whole division was as horrible as it was at this point last year, which everyone was at or below 500 basically, the Twins would be not running away with it, but it would be a much different perception of how well they've played and how strong they look and all that. But if you look now, they're 4.5 back of Cleveland. They play an easier schedule than Cleveland remaining schedule, but not significantly so. Like Cleveland has one of the tougher remaining schedules. The Twins' schedule is like, kind of middle of the pack-ish. It's not like an easy schedule, in part because what I just talked about, the division, Kansas City is like almost literally twice as good as they were last year. Cleveland obviously is much better, and the Twins have 8 head-to-head matchups left against Cleveland, which is going to be a big factor here.
2 4-game series, which would be nice to go through.
They have
3-1 in those 2.
4 at home against Cleveland in August, and then 4 on the road against Cleveland, I think like in mid-September, mid to late September, something like that. So those are going to be huge. I mean,
they're also just 2.5 games ahead of the team that is out of the wild card, which is the Kansas City Royals. They also have games against us. Right?
Their playoff chances as of right now, obviously there's a difference between winning the division and winning the wild card, but if you kind of combine those into one, just make the playoffs.
Right.
Baseball Reference has them right around 70%, and Fangraphs has them right around 80%. And the real difference there is Baseball Reference is sort of using this season only.
Right.
Whereas Fangraphs is using like 3-year projections, so they view the Twins a little stronger and the Guardians a little weaker than what is if you're just looking at what's happened this season. So that's the gap in that. But, split the difference. They're 3/4 to make the playoffs and 1/4 not to, which is, not a horrible place to be. I'm assuming that's higher than their playoff odds were at this point last year, even though they had much higher division winning odds, but they had basically no chance to win the wild card at this point last year, which is a huge portion of that.
I wonder if there's a better chance than they had at the beginning of the year. I don't think so.
Oh, they definitely were not 75% to make the playoffs. Almost no one was 75% to make the playoffs
at the beginning of the season?
Except for like the Dodgers or something like that.
Well, maybe. Okay.
I mean, you just have so many people starting at scratch, basically. It's hard to do that. So, as we said, they start the second half Saturday, 2 versus the National League Central leading Brewers. And then they have a weekend, or 3, not a weekend series, 3 against the not only National League East, but Major League leading Philadelphia Phillies. So that's probably the toughest remaining chunk of their schedule if you're really getting
fair point.
Specific about it. Those 5 games, you're playing 2 of the probably 4 best teams in the National League and certainly 2 of the probably 10 best teams in baseball, including the one with the best record in all baseball in the Phillies.
2 of the best teams you'll probably face the rest of the season.
For sure.
I mean, those 2 in
they're already
Baltimore
done. They're done with the Yankees.
They're done with the Dodgers. They're done with Cleveland.
Yes.
Cleveland is the other. Cleveland in one series versus
here's
Baltimore.
Here's the thing about Cleveland. You want to play Cleveland.
Exactly.
I mean, theoretically. Assuming you want to win the division. I know that sounds stupid, but what I mean is assuming your focus is still prioritizing the division over a wild card spot. If you just want to make the playoffs, you actually don't want to play Cleveland. You'd rather play like the White Sox 8 more times. But if you still are holding out your focus of winning the division, which comes with a first round series at home against probably a weaker opponent, then you want as many games as possible against Cleveland. And if they're going to win this division, and I certainly still think they're capable of that. We're going to talk about the injuries and stuff, which right now looks like the biggest speed bump towards doing that. But if you're going to win the division, you're almost going to have a 5-3 or better record against Cleveland here. Not because you're going to take the tiebreaker. That's pretty much out the window because they're 0-5.
You'd have to go 7-1 to win the tiebreaker.
Right. So basically, they're 5 games back. Not 4.5 back because there's no game 163. So a tie goes to Cleveland most likely. But you need to at least chip away via your head-to-head matchups or not fall behind via your head-to-head matchups. And then you're hoping to take advantage of the slightly easier schedule. You're also, we can talk more about this later, but you're also just sort of hoping at some point that Cleveland comes back down to earth a little bit.
Yes, right.
I'm not suggesting they're not a good team. They clearly are a very good team. I mean, Cleveland's been good for a decade now.
Agreed.
But I don't know that they're 110
and they've already been
team.
through one of the tougher parts of their schedule, just before the All-Star break. I'm taking a look at sort of the remaining schedule here. Of the 5 or 6 tough teams the Twins have, almost all of them are home games. They've got Milwaukee at home, they've got Philadelphia at home, they've got Atlanta at home, they've got 4 of the games versus Cleveland at home, and they've got Baltimore at home. So that's it's nice to have that going for you.
So over the break. All-Star game wasn't super Twin-centric. Willie Castro, amusingly for the most versatile player in all of baseball, entered the All-Star game at DH, took one at bat, and then just stayed at DH, which is amusing.
I love that.
And then Carlos Correa, the bigger news was Carlos Correa, as we expected, sat out the All-Star game. He actually removed himself from the roster so they could add Corey Seager as a fourth shortstop for the hometown crowd, I guess. But didn't play because of his plantar fasciitis in the opposite foot that he had plantar fasciitis last year, which we're going to talk a lot more about momentarily.
Yeah, all of that news broke since the last free podcast we did. Right?
Now, we've had 2 episodes about that on the Patreon side, including.
So we apologize to all the patrons out there because we're going to probably cover a little bit of it,
including one with special guest Betsy Helfand of the St. Paul Pioneer Press, which is a great episode, and you can listen to that on Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you guys join us, if only through the trade deadline, which is less than 2 weeks away.
Give it a pull.
It'll cost you like $5 to join between now and the trade deadline. You'll get multiple additional episodes commercial free each week, and you'll get kind of breaking news episode, emergency episode anytime they make a trade between now and then. So.
We should mention that the trade deadline is July 30th.
Yes.
We will be doing a Patreon podcast literally the next morning, July 31st.
Bright and early the next morning.
Bright and early the next morning to cover it. And unfortunately, I'm going to be out of town that Friday, so we're not doing a free podcast that week.
Right. So join the Patreon. Yeah. You should be doing that anyway at this point.
Come on.
Let's be honest.
It's going to be $4.
And then Joe Margo's in the Hall of Fame.
That's right. Yay.
Which is good. He'll be, I was thinking about this.
Speaking of which, with the airlines all messed up today, did you go on the airlines with stuff? How many people are struggling getting their ass to Cooperstown? I feel for you people. I am sorry about that.
You're such an empathetic person.
I am an empathetic person.
I feel nothing towards them. has no effect on my life. I was thinking about this. Once Mauer goes in, at least in my mind, the top 7 players in Twins history will be in the Hall of Fame.
Huh.
All 7.
Yeah.
And they'll all be wearing a Twins hat also.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you're right.
That's something. For a team that's I don't want to say only been around since
60 years.
1961, but it's, they're not the Yankees or the Dodgers or anything like that. That's it's like one a decade.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
That's not bad.
One Hall of Famer wearing your cap per decade is certainly well above average. Yeah. I mean, there are some teams that have none, obviously. Yeah. So, kind of interesting.
And after we win a couple World Series with Correa, we've got a shot at adding him.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough one to get him off that Astros hat, I think.
I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
We just got to keep him around for 10 years, have him win a couple of World Series here.
That's it.
That's it.
That's no big deal, right?
Yeah,
that's easy.
We're on track.
Like you're contributing to it. By what are you massaging his heel every night?
So if only.
What would you pay to massage his heel? That's how they could raise some payroll money.
Community fund money.
No, for payroll next year. By the hour. It's $1,000 an hour to massage Carlos Correa's injured heel. You could do both. You could have 2 people doing it because the last year still.
Sure, yeah.
You want to keep that heel in good shape.
Yeah, why not each
heel? So that's $2,000 an hour. That starts to add up. Maybe you could add a middle reliever or something like that at the deadline, which we're going to talk about that too later on in the show. But yeah, the Correa. I mean, we're going to find out a lot more tomorrow. They're coming home. First game of a homestand. We're going to get the full injury rundown, my guess, which is substantial at this point. It's a long list, unfortunately, because you have Jose Miranda, who was placed on the IL over the break, but theoretically, because of the break and the backdating of the IL stint, he is eligible to return Sunday. So he could just miss Saturday's game, come back Sunday with the lower back strain, I think is what they announced it as. Correa hasn't been placed on the IL as of yet.
So
theoretically, he could be in the lineup tomorrow night.
Right.
Which I think he certainly portrayed it as that being the plan.
I would expect it.
We'll see.
If he's not, then they effed up by not putting him on the IL.
No, because it's not going to matter. If he's not in the lineup, he's going to take more than 10 days off anyway, I bet. That, to me, is the biggest, much bigger worry than any of these other injuries. I mean, they have a significant number of injuries right now. First of all, remember how naive it was to say they had too many infielders? Miranda on the IL. Correa hurt. Farmer on the IL. Austin Martin on the IL. Royce Lewis on the IL.
Christian Vasquez playing third base.
Well, probably not anymore, but we'll see. And then you also have Jeffers and Buxton, who aren't infielders. I guess Jeffers theoretically could be counted as an infielder. But so of all those, and those are some significant. I mean, I would argue those are. Well, if you're including Jeffers and Buxton,
right,
that's probably like 5 of the Twins' top 7 players,
right,
something like that.
Right.
Those are all significant, and the Royce Lewis one, he's been injured, so it's a little bit of a different scenario than guys who just kind of got shut down right before the break. But the Correa thing, because of how it played out last year with the same injury, now he has said, and the Twins have said, this is a less severe version of plantar fasciitis, but I would just caution that I don't think it's as cut and dry. Not this case or anything, and I'm not saying they don't feel that way, but we've seen with this injury, not only with Correa last year, but I remember being a Wolves fan with Michael Williams and Wally Zerbiak, and there's all kinds of plantar fasciitis.
We've got all kinds of bad experience.
This thing is not predictable. It's
right.
very much, the timelines on it shift. Sometimes they don't have a timeline, like with Correa last year, and it requires significant time off typically to sort of heal itself. And so we talked about this with Betsy, who was actually on the road trip and had interviewed Correa about it to get her sort of impression, which I thought was interesting. And we talked about the idea that he sort of downplayed it on the road trip by saying, hey, I'm smarter than I was about this last year. What I learned last year is you got to take time off. If you play through it, it's not going to get any better, and your play is going to suffer, which we saw last year. Right. And he said, well, what I've learned now this time around is to take some time off. And so it's good.
The All-Star break.
It's good that the All-Star break. Right. Except my thing is, like, that would be amazing if that's true. Right. I don't know if that's 6 days off or whatever it is. Especially, it's not like he was on a couch with his foot up. He was walking the red carpet. He was traveling. He was. I'm not saying that's like physically exhausting to anybody but me.
Sure.
But he was on his feet, and so if a week off is something that is going to significantly help this injury, then it is definitely, truly less severe than it was last year, because a week off didn't do anything last year. Right. So that's kind of my worry here with Correa. Obviously, he was the first half MVP. He's the leader of the team. We saw last year that he is certainly, from a toughness standpoint, willing and able to play through it.
Yes.
He basically played almost every game before sitting out the last 10 games because they had already clinched the division heading into the playoffs.
We wondered if, in part, the Kyle Farmer injury last year, encouraged him to keep playing and keep playing and keep playing, despite the fact that he might have been. I mean, he pushed it even when he was starting to feel it early on in the season. Right.
So, if indeed that's the lesson he learned, and the week off didn't fix it, then I'm curious to see how they handle this. Now, this time around, they could just have Brooks Lee play shortstop.
Yep.
They're more comfortable with Willie Castro playing shortstop than they were at this time last year, too. But then that depends on Miranda being healthy at third.
Yeah, is Miranda back?
Depends at some point on Royce Lewis being healthy and coming back, joining the infield mix. Farmer's out. Martin's out. So some of your sort of ancillary role players are out, too. So, I don't know. This is one of those situations where...
Maybe Edward Julian.
Yeah, maybe Edward Julian, who's at AAA. He's healthy. He's at AAA. It's one of those situations where it's a big deal right now because there's so much uncertainty regarding it. It's possible by this time, or by tomorrow night, let's say, there's significantly less worry about it. Or it's possible that there's significantly more worry about it.
Right.
So we're sort of in the Schrodinger's infield right now. We don't know till we open the box.
You remember a week ago when we were like, what if Royce Lewis comes back? What are they going to do? How are they going to fit Royce Lewis back into the lineup?
But what do we always
fit him
say?
in the roster? Yeah, we said, if only we are so lucky.
Yeah, it's never an issue.
Now it's like,
these weeks
we need him back.
Months out, things are never an issue.
Otherwise, we're going to see more Diego Castillo at third base. So,
what do you got against Diego Castillo, buddy? Maybe he's a listener. You don't know.
I don't know.
Before we talk a little bit about more, we'll run down some of the other injury situations besides Correa. And then also, since we last spoke on the free show, there was a draft.
Yes.
3 days of a draft. So I got a little bit of inside scoop on their top 4 picks. We'll probably focus on. They had 4 of the top 70 picks. But we can talk about the overall strategy and all that stuff. But first, you may have heard our presenting sponsor for the entire episode is Black Stack Brewing.
That is correct.
And we would like to talk a little bit about them right now.
Yes. Black Stack Brewing, a brand new presenting sponsor for Gleeman and the Geek. If you wonder what their logo looks like, just take a look at your podcast player right now. You will see Gleeman and the Geek now presented by Black Stack Brewing. And Black Stack Brewing is it's kind of a big deal for them. They've been running a tap room, and they've had some distribution in sort of locally of their top award-winning IPAs.
It's near 94 and 280.
94 and 280.
Black Stack Brewing.
Big tap room, great place to go. I have, like I said, I've gone there several times. I've gotten texts from Phil Miller while he's there, raving about the IPAs there. They're known for a lot of their stuff.
You can find Black Stack beer all over the state.
Yes. From Grand Marais to Rochester, from Winona to Fargo, you can find all your favorites, including local 755 New England IPA. That's one of their I think that's sort of their flagship IPA. Also, Slopes French Pilsner, if you like the little lighter stuff. Pull Tabs Pale Ale, or Uncut Jams, or their Strawberry Rhubarb Sour. That is just such a Minnesotan.
And they have THC seltzers.
Yep.
So if you're interested in where to get it, and also just want to learn more about it, go to their website, Black Stack Brewing, and the where to buy page, and they can tell you all the new stores they're popping up in.
Very distinctive label. Once you start seeing it, you'll see it everywhere. They also, like we said, have the second biggest tap room in the state of Minnesota, including a 190-inch big screen where you can watch your favorite games on. And I mean, they're just big Twins fans. I know they're all
got
big
trivia nights. They got Taco
Right.
Tuesdays. They got they got all kinds of stuff. And you can also just have like meetups, get-togethers, and stuff there as like sort of a quasi event space too.
Yep.
And here's what we always say: if you like this show, you should support the people who help support this show.
That's right.
And they are our new presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. John can certainly vouch for the beer being good.
Yeah,
I know that.
It's really good.
He could do that before they became a sponsor, believe me.
They don't have just one IPA. They've got a lot of really good IPAs. You'll often see them collaborating with people. People like to collaborate with them because their beer is so good. So stop by Black Stack Brewing near 94 and 280, or even easier, ask for them at your local liquor store or bar, for that matter. And also, the second sponsor is Factor. We've talked about Factor meals in the past. I love them because they are healthy. They are super easy, and they're delivered right to you.
But also good quality.
Yeah,
they're not
really
just a microwavable meal. Yeah,
their butter chicken is amazing.
Okay, so let's talk about this butter chicken.
Really good.
The way it works is they can send you, whether you want low calorie, whether you want protein focused, whether you have specific dietary stuff.
Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto, any of that stuff they
will send you fresh, never frozen, dietitian approved, super easy to make. Just sort of heat it up and eat it. Yep. I've eaten it. John's eaten it. They have 35 different meals, and plus they have like add-ons that you can add to each of the meal too.
Makes you
each week new menu so that it kind of keeps it fresh. It can help you dieting. It can also just be like if you're someone who wants to take microwavable meals to work, but you don't want it to be terrible for you.
Exactly right.
Restaurant quality meals, premium ingredients. You can get the filet mignon and shrimp and salmon and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. So here's all you have to do. If you're a Gleeman and Geek listener, go to factormeals.com/Gleeman50, like 50. And use the code Gleeman50. And the reason it's Gleeman50 is because you get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month after that. That's code Gleeman50, Gleeman50 at factormeals.com/Gleeman50. Get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Factor, F-A-C-T-O-R, factormeals.com/Gleeman50 with the code Gleeman50. Okay, let's run down some of these injuries real quick. I think it seems like, again, they've been on an all-star break. They were on the road before that, so I haven't been able to pester anybody for a while here. I'm much less effective pestering people.
We often hear about
via text.
We often get updates on the injuries when they come back from a road trip and the first home game. They like to sit down and talk about
and the
things,
truth
which is going to be tomorrow.
These guys haven't even been around the team for days.
Right, exactly.
Everybody
they don't even really know how.
Right. You go your separate ways here during the all-star break. So, Jeffers has a banged-up foot that he's been playing through for a while. People probably saw him limping around a little bit in the last
That explains
series.
some of the usage maybe with him.
Yeah, except it's been pretty consistent for 2 years now.
Yeah.
They just alternate catcher start. Buxton's got the sore elbow from running into the wall during the road trip. Yeah. Sounds like both those guys will be ready to go, but who knows? Like I said, with Miranda's got the sore lower back. He's ineligible to play Saturday, but he would be eligible to come off the IL Sunday. Unclear if that's the plan, but that would obviously be a good thing. Farmer and Lewis are out, not ready to return yet. Or, excuse me, Farmer and Martin, and then, well, Lewis too. But that one, I'm hoping to get an update of some kind on Royce Lewis. Obviously, everybody's very hungry for those. We haven't really heard much of anything. How many weeks is that? That's
only been a couple of weeks.
3 weeks?
Week and a
maybe?
half?
No, it's been longer.
Really? Okay.
I think longer than that. But don't hold me to that. We'll never know. We can't find out. So that's the injury situation. With Castro and Lewis, or excuse me, Castro and Lee, not only can they play all three of the infield spots, other than first base, they could probably play first base too if you really want them to, but they can play all three of the infield spots, and they do. They're both switch hitters too, so you can play them every day without any sort of matchup-based issues. That does give the Twins, kind of maximum flexibility here. If Correa's out, one of them can play shortstop, the other can play second base. Right. But at some point, you need Miranda and or Correa. You need one of those two guys if Lewis is still going to be out for multiple weeks. Right. Because you're going to want somebody to play third. Right. And so without that, then you got Diego Castillo up. You got, like you said, they could call up Julian back up again if it's a longer term thing, something like that. But I think it sounds like the other injuries are relatively minor, or at least something that guys can plan to play through in the interim. Right. Correa certainly indicated that that's his plan too. I'm just basing my feelings on that on last year and other plantar fasciitis. So that's the situation with the injuries.
Which is why Castillo's on the roster. Yes. We should mention. I mean, if Correa cannot play tomorrow, I guess Castillo's playing third base
probably,
again, right?
Because they don't want to play Vasquez. They saw enough in this 2 balls that were hit to Vasquez.
We should mention with Castillo at third base, we got to see on Saturday Brooks Lee play second base.
Yes, made 3 really nice plays.
Made some great plays that they made for
one really bad throw
in his first start. That's right. Yeah, that's right. In Sunday's game, right.
But whatever. I'll take the good plays and figure he probably won't have that many relays to third base from the out.
An ill-advised throw as well.
Yeah, although they were going to lose anyway. It was going to be a runner on third with no outs. So that's the injury situation. We talked a minute ago, and maybe we'll talk more about it, about trying to chase down Cleveland. And I do think, maybe this is a homer take or whatever, although I've really been accused of that. I usually get accused of the opposite of that. But I'm sure a Cleveland fan might accuse me of that. I do think, if healthy, and even if Cleveland is pretty healthy, when they've had some injuries too, it's not like they've been immune to that like in years past. But, 4.5 games is a lot to make up in basically like 40-something% of a season. But it's certainly doable. And coming into the season,
especially if you take 5 out of 3 and get whittled away
5 out of 8, go 5 out of 3.
Yeah, go 5 and 3.
But it's not going to be doable if these injuries that we just discussed, and particularly Correa, Miranda, Lewis, and I'll throw Buxton in there too. But if these are even a couple of those are going to prove to be lingering, long-lasting, substantial with Correa, even if he plays through it, if his production drops like it did last year.
Well, I mean, you lose Correa, Royce Lewis, and Miranda.
Right, that's what I mean. So,
and 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. So, crazy. I mean, you're not going to chase down Cleveland, no matter if Cleveland comes back down to earth, because the thing is, what does that look like if Cleveland comes back down to earth? Well, it probably still means being a 500 or better team.
I mean, their offense has been really good this year.
So, I mean, it's not like I would expect Cleveland to come back down to earth and have a losing record in the second half of the season. So you're trying to catch a team that has already banked so many wins that even if they go 500, they're going to win 90-something games. Right. And that's a high bar for you to then clear, even if you're relatively hot, which the Twins have been now for 3 months basically. But the health looms over everything, and it's hard to kind of handicap this thing from an odds standpoint until we get some more clarity on that. I mean, I do think if Correa's right and the week off did him a world of good, and that it's more of a lingering,
Miranda's back Saturday,
and they can absolutely catch Cleveland, especially if they do well head to head, obviously, but. If not, if Correa gets shut down, Miranda gets shut down, Lewis, it takes him a month to get back or something like that from this point, they're not catching. I mean, Cleveland is too solid as like a baseline and has banked. I mean, they got the second best record in the American League.
You've got to start with the assumption that they do well versus Cleveland.
Well, right.
Which is a hard assumption to make when you're 0-5 versus Cleveland.
True. I mean, if you don't do that, if they go 3-5 against Cleveland, you're just not going to catch them. I mean, there's just very little room to do that because if you remove those 8 games, they only have like 50-something games against non-Cleveland opponents. So that's kind of where I'm at. If they were healthier, I think we'd talk a little bit more about schedules and matchups and strength of Cleveland and all that stuff. But so much of this is going to be driven by the health of the Twins. And for the next little while, that's such an unknown.
Well, as a potential segue here, the cliche in baseball is you spend the first third of the season figuring out who you are, the second third of the season, trying to become who you want to be, and the last third of the season, going for it, right? We're at the 3/4 mark of that second phase where we're trying to become and I thought going into the All-Star break, we pretty much had become the team we wanted to be.
They were playing their best ball, not so. I mean, like obviously the 12-game winning streak or whatever. Was it 12 games?
Yeah.
That's their best ball.
Sure.
But what I mean was they had won 7 consecutive series, all of them by winning 2 out of 3. And to me,
the offense was absolutely rolling, and some of the pitching was starting to come around.
Even more, they had stretches where they had a better record because of the streakiness. But in terms of consistent quality, coming back to win games, holding leads, bouncing back from series opening losses to win the next 2. I thought was a really encouraging stretch, even more so than just the record because of the way they were doing it. Just take 2 out of 3 in every series.
And I was taking a look at these last 2-3 weeks of July saying, okay, now what do they do at the trade deadline to finally to kind of complete this is who we are going to be. And now
they stumble in San Francisco, which it's not the end of the world to lose 2 out of 3.
But now we also have to take a look at what those 2 weeks are not. It's not just, what are they going to trade for? Now it's also going to be, and what's our health situation going to be like? And how much, I would also just, how much insurance do we want to have for injuries in August and September, which kind of brings us to some of the talk around the trade deadline. Where if you're,
it's tricky because, if some of these guys we've talked about, including Lewis, are going to be out,
right?
You need infield help. But if they're going to mostly be healthy, you don't really need any.
Right.
Offensive. I could maybe argue, we can get into this, like maybe you need a left-handed bat or you could use a right-handed hitting corner outfielder, except for Margot is doing pretty well in that role of late.
Yeah.
But, you go around the horn here, and if you get Miranda back and Correa back and Lewis at some point back and Brooks Lee stays, the last thing you need is an infielder.
Right.
Outfield-wise, you could maybe make an argument that they need a left-handed bat, except that bat has to be better than Larnach and Wallner, basically.
Right.
You still have Julian sitting at AAA.
Right.
You theoretically, I suppose, could have Kirilloff as an option of late, but it doesn't sound like that's probably going to happen. There are spots you can point to that are certainly upgrades, but it's a little bit like the rotation. Like, they could use a left-handed bat because Kepler hasn't been particularly good overall, except for the one, month-long streak. Kirilloff's been out. Julian's down. Wallner has looked okay, but question mark.
Sure.
Larnach has been solid, but not spectacular by any means. Certainly a
He's
question
keeping his
mark.
head above water, right?
You could use a left-handed bat because their best hitters are all right-handed, like we just talked about.
And now they're all hurt.
But now those guys are hurt. But the other problem is, similar to the discussion we're going to have in a minute about rotation options via the trade deadline, well, it's one thing to go, they could use a left-handed bat. Where's that guy going to play? Any left-handed bat that they bring in is going to have to be better than one or more of Kepler, Wallner, Larnach, Santana, Julian, etc., Kirilloff, whatever. Not to mention like Brooks Lee and Castro, who are switch hitters, who can be in part of that mix too. And I'm not saying that's an impossible bar to clear, but it is a bar to clear. It's not like they're playing, Mark Contreras or Nick Gordon or somebody out in left field. Right. Whereas that was, we just need an average or better bat. Well, they have a bunch of average or better bats.
Right.
Now the question is like, could they bring in a more of an impact bat, more of a proven commodity bat? Right. And you can, although as we're going to read some names off here, I've been working with The Athletic. We have an article coming out Monday, I think, maybe Tuesday. Top 50 players who could be moved at the trade deadline.
Okay.
Kind of a big board ranking of the 50 guys with some chance to be moved. Obviously, that's subjective.
It depends a little bit on which teams decide they're going to sell or buy.
But so I've been working on that.
Which, by the way, is still in question for a fair number of teams, right?
I mean, it will be even on the 30th.
Right, yeah.
Honestly. So I've gotten myself very familiar with the names involved here from overall, and I've tried to think about it from a Twins standpoint. left-handed bats are not the strength of this deadline.
Okay.
And there's a ton of right-handed bats. I mean, I'm not saying the Twins would have gone out and traded for these guys, but, Bichette, Vlad Guerrero, Luis Robert, Randy Rosarina, Pete Alonso, Christian Walker, Yandy Diaz. Those are like 8 of the top 10 bats who are kind of being speculated about being moved or on losing teams or whatever.
My God.
They're all right-handed.
Right.
And look, if you add one of those bats, you're going to make your lineup better, but it wouldn't really be a priority for the Twins because they have the number 1 or number 2 OPS against left-handed pitching all year. And as we just said, you can name 5 or 6 of their best players are either right-handed or switch hitters.
I mean, unless we end up with some severe injury issues or something that ends up,
The left-hand group is just not as impressive. There's some guys who are good. I don't know, Cody Bellinger.
Sure.
Although the Twins would not touch him because of his contract situation.
Well,
he could opt into big money.
Yes.
It's Jock Peterson, that type of guy who's solid.
Sure.
But are you going to want to give up a lot of prospect capital for 2 months of Jock Peterson when you already have?
But does anybody?
Well, maybe. I mean, he's a good hitter. Michael Conforto, Josh Bell, Jesse Winker.
Josh Bell, wow.
You got some guys who, again, if the bar wasn't above average already for left-handed bats, there are some left-handed bats who are, especially some impending free agents like Peterson, where the cost is not going to be exorbitant.
Yeah.
But do you want to give up anything to add a 120 OPS type of left-handed bat for 2 months when there's all kinds of variants there? Yeah. When Wallner might just be that, or Larnach might just be that, or fill in the blank with guys they have might just be that. So I think that makes it a little bit difficult. There are certainly left-handed bats that you could pry loose who aren't being heavily speculated about. But in terms of like obvious sellers or potential sellers, everybody's gone over the lists and stuff. So. That's where they're at.
I mean, some of those guys, I was thinking of some of the right-handed bats. Some of those right-handed bats might not even be available. Like you mentioned Vlad Guerrero, you mentioned Bichette.
Right.
It's not clear the Blue Jays want to trade either of those guys, in part because they're both under contract through 2025.
Right.
And the Blue Jays haven't basically announced that they're open for business for anybody that's going to be a free agent, but neither of those guys are going to be a free agent. And the Blue Jays, I think rightfully, are sort of like, we're not rebuilding, we're reloading. We're going to go for this again in 2025 and see what happens.
Yeah, I think they'll trade him.
You think they'll trade him at the deadline?
Yeah, because what does 2025 get you? It's not going to be a great team.
Hmm?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
That's a tough division.
You're right. That is.
And then you're just going to let those 2 guys walk? You get a draft pick for them, but that doesn't do anything. I don't know. In terms of... So, yeah, I think a left-handed bat, but it would have to be a pretty good left-handed bat, which makes it trickier. You could basically replace Santana against righties, but he's been playing pretty much every day. He's been great defensively, and he's been great against left-handed pitching, so that's just reducing his role. Right. Also, at some point, roster spots become an issue. I mean, you can say, reduce Santana's role, but who are you bumping from the roster with the left-handed bat you bring in? You can say reduce whoever's role. Larnach, Wallner, you could have those 2 in the lineup with a left-handed bat you bring in if you reduce Santana's role, but who are you cutting from the roster at that point?
Because even right now they could do that. Right? I mean, if everybody's healthy, they could have Larnach, Miranda, and Wallner in left field, first base, and DH versus right-handed hitters and Santana on the bench, which
is what they're going to do. Yeah, right. Except then Royce Lewis is going to come back, and then there's other guys coming too. So. And like I said, I think I've been saying this for 5 years basically, and they don't seem to agree. But right-handed hitting corner outfielder to platoon with some of these names that we just mentioned. On one hand, that's the role Manuel Margot's filling,
right?
And to some extent, Austin Martin was filling, but now he's injured. Although he should be back relatively soon, I think it sounds like. But on one hand, Margot's been playing pretty well for the last month and a half, something like that. So it'd be an odd time to sort of bump him out.
Yep.
On the other hand, he's got a 78 OPS plus for the season.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In a role that's been mostly corner platooning.
Yeah, he's got a 625 OPS right now.
Right. So, I mean, what are we really...
Right.
I'd still like a more of a thumpy bat there, but I don't know. Is that a priority? Do you want to... Is it worth upgrading? That's.
I mean, it's got to be pretty thumpy.
I may have just invented that, by the way. I don't know what that even means.
It's going to be a pretty thumpy bat.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Thumpy.
Yeah.
I like that.
Pete Alonso's a nice thumpy bat.
Here's the thing about being a writer or a podcaster. You just say whatever you want.
Exactly.
I could pretend that's a real thing I've heard.
You're a modern day Shakespeare. You just make up words all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little thumpier than Shakespeare. But I could be like,
you are a little thumpier than you should be.
I'm the least thumpy person. I'm lumpy. Thumpy, I don't know about.
Your spine's a little thumpy these days.
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know. I gave an update on Patreon, but since last we spoke, I've had a robot.
Is that a steroid injection in your spine? Do you know what that was?
Among other things, yes.
Among other things.
They did a pain-killing injection, a steroid injection, and some sort of basically like a lubricant.
Yeah. And one lucky tech listener got to see your butt.
Yeah. I go in. I told this on Patreon with Betsy, but I go in, and I've seen 7 different doctors or techs for this issue. Now, 3 of them have told me that they're K-Fan listeners / podcast listeners / The Athletic, which is great. That's wonderful. It's not as wonderful when the reason I'm seeing them is I'm going to lie face down on a thing. They're going to pull my pants down. They're going to sort of clean the area, which is butt cheeks adjacent, and then have a robot with an X-ray guided robot inject the world's biggest needle into my back. So anyway, the guy's like, yeah, I'm a listener. Love your work. He was talking to me about the draft because the draft had been the night before.
That would be a good segue.
He goes like,
I wish I'd have saved.
He goes like, what do you think about all these college hitters? And there's like a needle going into my back with my butt cheeks out. Anyway, I didn't imagine ever saying butt cheeks this many times on a podcast. But yeah, shout out to the listeners in the medical profession. I've apparently run into all of them. So yes, I've been injected a lot of times.
I've had a doctor who looked at my knee say, "Oh yeah, by the way," after he finished examining me, say, "But knee's an entirely different thing.
Oh, boy,
I'm much more comfortable
boy,
with
is it. I was like, well, you got a hell of a story to tell your friends now. Hey, you know the guy on K-Fan? Yeah.
If you're a proctologist who's listening right now, we don't want to know.
No. Thankfully, I don't need that yet. But the spine is right above. It turns out the spine is right above the butt cheeks. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it was very strange. They bring in this big sort of robotic X-ray thing because they have to do like a guided injection, and it really makes you think about AI and all these movies you've watched about robots going nuts when it's like this robot's just going to kind of drop this, I don't know, about 8-foot-long needle into your back a few times. Anyway,
Lord.
Good times though. But I'm here. I'm ready to tough it out.
Good time to pivot to a sponsor right now.
Sure, yeah. Is it not related to any of that thing we were talking about?
Let's talk a little about the newest place in Uptown, Beckett's. I have been there. I've been there with Aaron's significant other, Becky.
Well, her lame boyfriend is at home. She goes to Beckett's.
That's right. And then we're actually having a Twins Daily watch party, trade deadline recap / watch party at Beckett's on July 30th. I think we're announcing that today on Twins Daily. Tickets will be available on Wednesday. It's a brand new bar in Lynn Lake. It's just a few doors down from Uptown. This is absolutely in our listeners' wheelhouse because it celebrates everything that makes sports entertaining, from old Beckett's magazines to drinks served in a Kirby bucket.
Yeah, it's a real. Becky was sending me pictures of the nostalgia components,
right. including Dome Dogs. They have Dome Dogs there for you to eat. Good beer selection too, and in fact, a reasonably priced beer selection, which I was
whole bunch of TVs to watch games.
18 TVs to watch games.
She said you guys were watching women's bowling championships or something.
We had so much fun watching the NCAA because the Twins were getting blown out. It was the first game versus the Astros, and they put on one of the random TVs, or 2 of the random TVs. There was the NCAA women's bowling championships, and we got so into it. It was so much fun.
It's corner Lake Lindale, like you said, but right by Uptown, which is one of my favorite spots.
The address is 3006 Lindale.
Yeah. On the other side is Rectangle, which is a great spot. It's one of the best corners in Minneapolis.
Just between Rectangle and Uptown.
And for Gleeman and the Geek listeners,
this is fun.
Bring in an old baseball card, and you get a free pull of either like Miller High Life or ham, something like that, that they'll give you courtesy of Gleeman the Geek. Beckett's. That's coming right out of John Bonus's wallet, too, so that beer will be even sweeter.
But also check out the Twins Daily event there. That's a good way to check it out too.
Then our next sponsor is Game Time. Now that games are starting back up, the Twins are at home.
Yep.
Game Time. The Game Time app specializes in hard to find tickets, but also last minute tickets.
Yes.
Not only to sporting events, but like concerts and shows and stuff too. the way we always suggest using it is download the Game Time app, you create an account, and if you use the code Gleeman when you create an account, you can get $20 off your first purchase. You can literally pull up the app on your phone as you're walking to Target Field.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to whatever gate you're going in, you can have the tickets ready to scan. You can walk right in. And the beauty of the Game Time app, they have a service within the app that will kind of show you the best value, comparing the seat versus the price tag.
You can actually see sort of the view from the seat.
Yeah. So terms apply, but create an account on the Game Time app and then redeem the code GLEEMAN, Gleeman, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the hitting or the lineup section of the trade deadline piece. Dan wrote, I mean, the focus is going to be more on pitching, obviously, because their lineup has been very good and their pitching and especially rotation has not been very good. Dan Hayes wrote 2 days ago, let's say, an article for The Athletic about what their mindset might be heading into the deadline, and said what we've kind of speculated about, which is starting pitcher could definitely be part of the focus.
Right.
And something we speculated about previously is because of all the payroll-related issues during the offseason and the fact that attendance is even down further than they expected, because they expected it to rise and it's actually decreased slightly at Target Field, and because the television situation has gotten even worse, significantly worse in terms of revenue. Right. I'm just extraordinarily skeptical about their willingness to take on any additional substantial money at the deadline.
So we talked basically, they could go kind of three ways on pitching, right? And they could do nothing for starting pitching. They could do nothing. Just say we've got what we've got, and it's pretty good. They could go high end and look for like a playoff caliber starter and sort of bump everybody down, or they could kind of go, well, let's just get a rental arm, to middle of the rotation, middle to end of the rotation rental arm, just to keep things afloat towards that end if anything goes wrong. And what you're saying
within
is,
that, there's also two different paths you can take.
Okay.
One is, if you're looking for a top arm, you try to get the Tarek Skubal, who's got 2.5 years of team control, or you try to get, I can name a bunch of guys, but Luzardo, even someone like Eric Fetty. These are like, Fetty's not a top guy. He's got a year left after this.
Sure.
Or you go the way that, and that has tended to be their approach at the deadline, almost always.
Right.
And just in general with not so much at the deadline, although they did this with Maui, but like even trading for Sonny Gray, trading for Pablo Lopez, trading for Kenta Maeda before that, trading for Jake Odorizzi before that.
They have liked acquiring, I would say, decent pitchers, middle rotation or slightly better, for more than 1 year of control. If they're going to give up prospects, they don't want to give up. They want to get more than 2 months of control over that pitcher.
Or even if it's an off-season trade like Lopez and Gray and stuff, they don't just want a 1 year pickup. That's clearly been their focus, and I think a lot of teams in their position do make that their focus. You can't, if you're a team with a mid-size or lower payroll, you can't give up a bunch of prospect capital just to bring a guy in for 1 year. It's a lot trickier to do that. But here's where my skepticism comes in. I don't think, whether it's someone who's under contract, where they're getting, 15, 18, 20 million a year
paid well
for the next couple of years. And I'm not saying those are exorbitant prices for some of these guys, but they are exorbitant when you look at the Twins' expected payroll situation for next year. Or it's even a situation like I'm not saying they're going to trade for Skubal, but there are some guys who just have 2 remaining years of arbitration eligibility.
Well, they're going to be expensive
they're
too.
They're going to start to make 8 to 10 million, 12 million, like that. Again, these are extremely fair prices just on an island here. But the Twins are already in a situation where I'm very skeptical about their payroll next year.
The other thing that has changed from where it was 3-4 years ago, we would often go into the offseason saying, well, they've got Jose Barrios and then they need 4 pitchers. You know what I mean? Like
theoretically, they have a full rotation for next year.
I mean, theoretically, at the very least.
It could be the same rotation as they have right now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all 5 of the guys that they have right now are available next year, are under team control for next year.
Plus Festa, Varlin, Zebby Matthews, who we can talk about in a second.
We'll talk about that,
got called up to AAA.
Yeah, right.
We call that promoted.
Sorry, let's call it.
Don't get everybody all worked up. So, but if you're starting to look at whether it's a rental, so yeah, the alternative is a rental.
Right.
The alternative is a guy who's an impending free agent. So you're getting them essentially for 2 months, which is going to be at most 8 to 10 starts. Plus, you hope October.
You are theoretically not giving up, anything near a top prospect for it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, the price tag is going to be lower when you're getting 10 starts of someone instead of 70 starts of someone.
Sure.
But even with that, some of these rentals, because they're close to free agency, are relatively expensive in terms of salary. And by the time the trade deadline happens, 2/3 of their salary will have been paid for the year. There'll be about a third of the season left. And they get paid. That's how MLB pay works. Is like if you're a $20 million salary, by the time July 30th rolls around, you've been paid like $14 million out of that $20 million.
Right.
So the Twins or another buying team would, quote unquote, only be taking on $6 million of the $20 million, or let's call it $3.5 million of the $10 million, or whatever it is.
Sure.
That makes it a little more palatable. But I guess until proven otherwise, I'm pretty skeptical that they're willing to take on $3 million, $5 million, $6 million, let alone $10 million or something like that. And so the reason that factors into things is with a rental, I think a selling team might be more willing to eat the money to get a slightly better prospect haul. But with a guy who's got a year or two of team control remaining, eating the money is like they're dealing with a much bigger pool of offers in terms of prospect capital anyway.
Right.
And so where all this comes back to the Twins, like Dan mentioned Kikuchi from the Blue Jays.
Yeah.
He's an impending free agent, high strikeout guy. He's had some all-star caliber years. He's had some mediocre years. He's been up and down. We saw last year they didn't even start him against the Twins in the playoffs, which tells you what the Blue Jays thought.
They went to him instead of when they pulled Barrios early, right? He did not have particularly good outing.
Well. But I think he's making $10 million, something like that, roughly. Good strikeout rate. He's a lefty. He's certainly a mid-rotation or higher caliber starting pitcher.
Yeah.
He's certainly better than one or more people in their rotation currently. If you say to the Blue Jays, we'll give you a good prospect or two for him. They're, like you said, the Blue Jays, even if they're not doing a full-scale sell-off, they're going to be selling their impending free agents. I don't know that he's going to be a qualifying offer guy necessarily. He could be, but because if a team is going to make the qualifying offer to an impending free agent, like Pete Alonso, let's say, they're not going to trade that player for less than the value of the draft pick compensation they would get for a qualifying offer.
Right.
But with Kikuchi, I think he might just take the qualifying offer at $21 million or whatever it is. It could be iffy. But anyway, my point is, if you say to the Blue Jays, hey, we can't even take on the $3 million and change he's owed for the rest of the season, you have to eat that $3 million.
We need you to trade Kyle Farmer. We need you to take Kyle Farmer back and
there's two ways you can do it. They can just eat the money. They can send you the money. They can pay down the salary.
Well, that's true, right?
Which is going to require you to increase the prospect value that you're sending back. Or you can try to balance the salary and say, we'll send you Kyle Farmer, or we'll send you fill in the blank player, although the Twins don't really have that many guys who are making big money that they would be willing to trade. But that's a potential solution. But in either scenario, you're going to have to be increasing your offer in terms of prospect capital for the money aspect. But Dan's article suggested, and I'm not surprised by this, the most likely target from a pitching standpoint would be someone like Kikuchi, who is an impending free agent with a expensive salary but not a huge salary that you can either ask to have paid down, you can cover, or if you have to, you take on $3 million. You talk to Poleheads into that or whatever. Good luck with that, but it's, I guess, possible. And because he's a good but not great starter, and because he has no future value because he's a free agent, you would hope that he's available to you for a lower tier of prospect or prospects than someone like, Luzardo, or let alone Scuba or Crochet or guys like that.
There's certainly easier to find guys like that than the high-end guys. Like, there's just more of them on the market.
Well, I have a list here. If we want to go over some names.
If you can't get Kikuchi, you just move on to the next one until you find somebody who's willing to take what you can give them.
So here are, I would say, the best rental starting pitchers. Again, this is subjective because it's me and my cohorts at The Athletic trying to speculate on who will actually be trading guys off. But you have Kikuchi. I would say he's, in my mind, probably the fourth best rental starting pitcher. The best one, if the Rangers decide to sell coming off a World Series, is Max Scherzer.
Right.
And the second best one is probably Nathan Eovaldi.
Right. What's Scherzer making this year? $40 million?
Right. Well, I mean, the Mets are paying half of it already.
Oh, all right.
Because that's how he got to the Rangers.
Okay, all right.
They paid down that money. But yeah, this would be a scenario like we were talking about. Even with the Mets paying half his salary and even with 2/3 of the season already paid for,
that's $6 or $7 million.
There's no chance the Twins are going to take on $7 million in additional payroll after cutting the payroll $30 million and having attendance go down.
Right.
I mean, I would love to be wrong.
Right, yes, of course.
I would love to be wrong about this. No, nothing would make me happier, but come on.
Well, it doesn't sound like they're in the market for a top-end guy anyway.
Right. But so Scherzer and Eovaldi, both obviously great pitchers. Scherzer's a Hall of Famer. Eovaldi's just a multi-time All-Star. Both have really good playoff track records. Both would be sort of veteran, frontline, game one or game two type of guys that you could add. I mean, I would certainly pursue that. Like you said, I don't think it's likely in terms of what it would cost from a prospect standpoint to get them. But, I mean, if you could add Nathan Eovaldi next to Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan,
good Lord,
that's something.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
that gets you excited about the postseason.
Right. So I would put Jack Flaherty, who's just skipped the start against the Twins, but he's back healthy, of the Tigers. He was a guy who signed, I think, a 1-year, $14 million deal, roughly that, with the Tigers this offseason. Go back 5 years, he was a great young pitcher with the Cardinals, had a bunch of injury problems. This was sort of a bounce-back 1-year flyer. Couldn't have worked out better. I mean, the Tigers aren't as good as they had hoped to be, but he's been
provided he really is
top
healthy.
10 pitcher, I would say.
Right. Provided this is not a
he's been phenomenal. I mean, the stuff is back up to the mid-90s, huge strikeout rate, low 3 ERA, all-star caliber first half. But he's an impending free agent. The whole point from his standpoint of signing this 1-year deal was to have a really good year and then go sign a $100 million deal. I would be surprised if the Tigers, I guess, didn't look to trade him. I mean, they're out of contention at this point. He's on a 1-year deal. He could be, I guess, a qualifying offer guy, something like that. But that would be a hell of a pickup. Although, are the Tigers going to want to trade in the division, and the Twins going to want to trade in?
And he's a little cheaper than some of the other options at $14 million a year. He's down to $4 million plus per.
He's also a lot younger than Scherzer and Eovaldi, although they all have some injury issues there. Then I would put Kikuchi probably as the fourth guy. And then you get into this realm of, fourth or fifth starters where it's like, is this guy better than Bailey Ober?
Right.
No, but is he better than Chris Paddock? Well, what we've seen from Paddock so far.
And then if Paddock agrees to move to the bullpen, then you've solved a problem down there.
Frankie Montas, who we've heard linked to the Twins.
Oh, my God.
But has now had a big injury and is not as good as he used to be.
Right.
But he's on a 1-year deal with the Reds.
Okay. I was like, who is he even with now?
Luis Severino, who's, again, not as good as he used to be, but still pretty solid on a 1-year deal with the Mets.
Yeah, the Mets are the last wild card team right now.
Yeah. Tyler Anderson, who made the All-Star team, but, for the Angels at the end of a 1-year deal, lefty, I would say a solid third or fourth starter, something like that. Those are the group of, how many is that? I guess that would be 7 guys who are like, okay, those are the rentals that to me, there's a variance there, obviously from Scherzer to Tyler Anderson, but those are the guys who, the first 3 or 4 names would be an upgrade to the playoff rotation. The last 3 or 4 names would not be an upgrade necessarily to the playoff rotation, but would upgrade the regular season rotation and would also provide you with insurance for the playoff rotation if somebody were to go down or Pablo Lopez were to continue struggling. So that's not, I know people would love to have 20 options or something, but that's not a small. But the problem is, are the Rangers selling? Are the Mets selling? Are the fill in the blanks selling?
Right. Yeah,
it might only end up being 3 of those guys.
It's true. I gotta think. I think the Rangers are definitely a team to watch. Like just to scoreboard watch, to see which way they are.
If they weren't
going,
coming off a World Series, they'd probably be selling. But that's a hard pill to swallow.
On the other hand, you've got several years worth of grace coming off of a World Series.
That's true, but you don't you want to kind of press that a little bit? You want to double down on that as much as you can. But
right now, they're 7.5 games back of the wild card.
Right.
They are 4 games under 500.
Right. Although they were similar at this point last year too.
No, they were at the top of the division at this point last year.
No.
It was they fell asleep. They fell apart in August.
Right, but I'm saying, yes, you're right. I mean, not this point, but like August. They were right above 500 at this mid-August,
probably end of August, beginning of September.
Saying,
right? Yeah, that's fair.
You don't have to make that although the much like the Twins in the Central, the landscape has changed a little bit in terms of just making the playoffs, and the landscape for that division has changed a little bit too. But they won that division, or they tied with 88 wins.
That's right. Yeah, they lost the division on the last day of the season.
So
right.
They're 4 below 500, but
and they're 7.5 game back, and they're the 5th team out of the playoffs. They've got to pass Detroit.
It's not always. I mean, the number of games you're behind is obviously key, but I think a lot of teams and fan bases fool themselves in terms of the wild card. You go, well, they're only 5 games back,
right?
With 70 to play or whatever. That's certainly doable. But if 5 teams or 8 teams are ahead of you,
right, somebody else is going to be good.
Somebody else is going to be good during that stretch too, and you can't. It's not like you can just beat one team head to head and take advantage of it. So, let's see the other.
I mean, it's kind of looking like a team is going to have to be. Like the last wildcard team is going to be a 90-win team or something like that. Like that seems what you've got to kind of get to at this point.
Something like that. I would say 88 to 90. I mean, that's sort of what it was last year, I guess, too. But the Blue Jays won like 87?
Yeah, but right now, I mean, the team that's half a game back of the Twins is the last wildcard team. That's Boston. I think they've got to be on a 90-win pace right now.
Yeah. I still think that the Royals are going to – I mean, they've already fallen a little bit. But
yeah, right.
We'll see. Non-rentals, we talked about Scooble, Crochet, Luzardo. Those would obviously be the bigger names.
Right.
Fedde, who the Twins have seen a couple times with the White Sox, has another year of control, relatively cheap deal. The White Sox are certainly selling. That's not going to be the issue. It's going to be, do you want to trade into division, send them a prospect? Do they want to do all that?
I'm also not sure how much I trust Fedde, but
I mean, who do you trust?
Right.
Tyler Anderson and Severino and Montes?
Right. But I don't have to trust him for a year and a half.
True. That's true. There's 2 interesting ones. We just saw one of them in Blake Snell.
Oh, yeah.
Blake Snell's technically on a 1-year deal, but the problem from the Twins standpoint, first of all, it's a $30 million 1-year deal. So you're going to have to either take on a bunch of money,
that's true.
Or the Padres are going to have to eat a bunch of money. First of all, it's not clear the Padres are going to sell.
Yeah, they're also just 1 game back of the wild card right now. Right.
But then the bigger problem is if he gets hurt or pitches poorly in the final 2 months, and he's been hurt and pitched poorly basically up until 2 weeks ago, the Twins saw a very good version of him.
Yes, they did. Yes,
he can pick up options on his deal.
Oh, is that right?
For like $70 million over the next 2 years. Well, the Twins are not in a position, even if there's a slim chance of that being picked up, to kind of be saddled with that.
Of course.
Jordan Montgomery, similar. He's been pretty awful.
Right.
He can pick up, I think, a $25 or $30 million option for next year. Or it might even be a vesting option.
This is interesting.
So it's like
we've talked about these contracts when Correa signed to that kind of a deal.
These 1 year, and the Boris Club, where they had to settle for these weird 1 year deals.
Right, and that's all great if they perform well. But what we had not seen is a guy fall apart or get hurt.
Correct.
And now suddenly you're got $30 million you're just eating.
Yeah, if the Twins
year
knew,
2 and 3,
like Snell and Montgomery were on true 1 year deals, I actually think they might be sort of appealing. But the last thing, and honestly, the way their payroll is, even if Snell pitches well and stays healthy, or Montgomery pitches reasonably well down the stretch, which he hasn't so far, they're just not in a position, even if you think it's decent value, to have somebody pick up a $25, $30 million option. Now you could then try to trade those guys. Right. But I think that complicates it in a way that I would be very surprised if they even made calls on those guys. Right. But so that's kind of the state of the starting pitching. We'll talk a little bit about the relief pitching, but first let's talk about our last sponsor. BetterHelp is sponsoring the podcast. We've talked about him before. The idea behind BetterHelp is they can set you up with a real licensed therapist. They can tailor it to not only what you want to talk to someone about, but how you prefer to talk to them.
That's right.
If you want to do a video call, you can do a video call. If you don't like being on camera, you do a phone call. If you don't like being on the phone, which I hate being on the phone, you can do just a live chat and type with somebody. And they can typically set it up in days rather than weeks, which often is the case when you're trying to see somebody in person.
Yeah, if you've made the tough decision, the personal decision that you need to talk to therapist, you need to get some help or something like that, this removes all those barriers that can get in your way. If you say to yourself, "This is time. It's time. It's time for me to accept this and move forward on it," well, then BetterHelp is sitting there waiting for you. And so we'd encourage you to stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. You just visit betterhelp.com/Gleeman today, and you get 10% off your first month too. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Gleeman.
Okay. So last but not least, relief pitchers. This one's tricky too because of the injury issue. I mean, if they have a healthy Brock Stewart back.
Right. Yeah, right.
Which he's another guy we didn't even mention earlier because we were talking about hitters being injured, but hoping to get an update on him tomorrow too. If you have a healthy Brock Stewart back, I don't know that you need to add a
especially with Alcala's been coming back.
And Sands has looked pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, if Alcala is your fourth guy and Sands is your fifth guy and Stallmont is your sixth guy and then you got a couple of lefties, Duran, Jackson, Stewart are at the top there.
Yeah.
I don't know that. I mean, you can always use an extra reliever, but I don't know that it's a situation where you need to be.
And you've got some potential options of guys who could move from starting pitching to the
Paddock,
bullpen like they
Varland,
did last year,
etc.
I wouldn't be shocked if maybe it's foolish to be excited or to take last year what happened as sort of a successful template that you can just keep rolling back year after year after year. But I can see where they would want to try it again with we'll move Varland to the bullpen for the last 2 months. Well, how about Festa, or how about Zebby Matthews, or how about Paddock if we end up getting a starting pitcher?
Some of the best, I always bring up Francisco Rodriguez like 25 years ago, whatever that was. Some of the best postseason bullpen performances have been young starters sort of coming out of nowhere and getting hot for a month and just throwing maximum velocity for an inning at a time or whatever.
Why not?
But if Stewart is a question mark, and the tricky part is you only have 2 weeks to figure this out, basically.
Sure.
Although it was similar last year, I guess. But
or if Paddock's a question mark.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing with Paddock, everyone talks about moving into the bullpen, but he didn't have like a run of success in the bullpen last year. He made like 2 appearances.
Yeah.
He gave up more runs than innings, I think, and he pitched once in the playoffs. Varland at least had like some success in the bullpen.
Yeah, right.
Paddock is still sort of a theoretical success in the bullpen. But the stuff looked good. But I'm just saying he didn't even he pitched like
he was also
times
coming off
total.
of Tommy John, right.
Well, right, but I'm just there's no evidence. Chris Paddock has never had success in the bullpen his entire life. Whereas at least Varland, there's some evidence there. But bullpen wise, I would bet very heavily that if they were to make a bullpen move at the deadline, it would be for a rent. It would be for a rental.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, yeah, lefty righty is another issue because we just listed off all the righties.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, who's the lefty you trust? I don't know.
Taylor's been a little better lately.
Yeah, but I mean, even in last year's playoffs,
right?
That became an issue. Stephen Oker has been fine for the most part, but I don't know that you want. The problem though is like realistically, how many lefties are you going to bring in,
right,
or have already that you're going to want facing Yordan Alvarez or Kyle Tucker or
it's almost got to be an elite left-handed reliever,
and those
at
guys,
that point,
you might as well just go with your best righties at that stage, which I suspect they would probably do. But so the reason I say I would expect it to be a rental, whether it's a lefty or a righty, if they were to add someone from the bullpen. One, it's the issues we talked about. They can't really be taking on salary for next year in a reliever. They also just have shown no evidence of investing significant money in a reliever in years. So to take on a guy who's got like 2 years left seems unlikely. But the other issue is they tried to do this 2 deadlines ago.
Yeah, I know.
In Jorge Lopez. And, I mean, they were just wrong about Lopez on every front in general. But one of the reasons that they liked Lopez so much, in addition to the fact that he had been dominant and he was an all-star and he could plug right in, was that he had 3 years of team control remaining. Yeah. Well, it turned out that had no value. No. That had negative value, actually. And so maybe that's a lesson learned there with relievers, because as we often talk about, I don't know that you want to be planning 3 years down the road with any reliever.
Right.
So, but here are some rentals. It's a little different than starting pitching at the deadline. There are always going to be a half dozen or more relievers traded at the deadline. Yeah. Because even terrible teams, obvious sellers, have a couple of good relievers. And they're not incentivized to keep those guys because what do you need a good veteran reliever on a crappy team for?
Well, and you're not looking for you're not looking for a closer here. You're not looking for a ninth inning guy, right? Those are the guys that, if you're going to see a team get anything of significant value for a reliever, it's going to be this is the top of the top end guy who's going to be in Game 7 of ALDS.
A lot of times those guys are under team control for more years, which I wouldn't expect. I mean, Mason Miller or somebody like that you could go for. That's a whole different.
Miller's a good example.
That's a whole different ball game. Yep. But if you're just looking at a setup man for 2 months, now the flip side to that is you're paying something prospect capital wise. Yeah. For what can often be like 14 innings.
Yeah, that's true.
And even a great reliever.
Sure.
If you have 2 bad appearances, you've wrecked that trade, basically. Because the sole sample is 15 innings. Yeah. So it becomes
sometimes it's Dyson, sometimes it's Fuller.
Yes, Fulmer.
Fulmer, yeah.
So here are, I would say, the best rental relievers. Paul Sewald, who I suggested they trade for last year. He ended up getting traded to Arizona from Seattle and was the Arizona closer during a World Series run. Yeah. So I'm patting myself on the back for that one. But Arizona, much like their counterparts in the World Series, have struggled this year, and they could potentially decide.
They're only a game back as well off the wild card, but they could be.
So he would be certainly a good right-handed setup man who has closing experience. He's on an expiring deal. Kenley Jansen, who's probably going to be a Hall of Fame closer and is still closing for the Red Sox.
Right.
But again, they've played themselves.
Right. They're in the wild card spot right now, but somehow the rumors about Kenley Jansen being available for trade are still out there, which is a little weird.
They're in one of the last wild card spots, and he's a 38-year-old impending free agent. I don't know. Carlos Estevez, who's a good setup man. I think he made the All-Star team last year for the Angels. Again, impending free agent.
Certainly available.
Yeah. And then from the left side,
available.
Andrew Chafin, who's we've talked about him in years past, lefty for the Tigers. Eccentric personality, but a pretty good proven lefty who can get righties out as well. He's an impending free agent. And then Aroldis Chapman, who seemingly now just gets traded to a contender every year. He's currently on the Pirates on a 1-year deal. Now,
Pirates also aren't necessarily out of this thing.
Well, I mean, are they going to keep a 38-year-old reliever on a 1-year deal? The problem with Chapman is twofold. One, he's not everybody's cup of tea in terms of a person. And I don't just mean personality-wise. I mean, he's been arrested for some stuff.
Right?
And thank you. With that said, it's hard to make an argument that he's like hurt clubhouse culture. Sure. In the sense that he got traded to the Rangers last year and they made the World Series. Yeah. He was on the Cubs when they won the World Series. Like, he's certainly been on very, very successful teams who have made deep playoff runs, often joining those teams at midseason when that can be tricky. Also, his control has been abysmal. It's never been good, but it's been abysmal. He's still got really good stuff and velocity, but it's not quite, 100th percentile stuff and velocity now. Gives up some homers.
Yeah,
as the Twins have seen a few times.
Yeah, he's.
But if you just want a lefty,
with the Rangers during the regular season were pretty rocky towards the end of last season.
Even in the playoffs, even with the Cubs, he had some rocky outings. Yeah. But if you just need a lefty to come in and try to strike out
95,
a really good
97,
a really good lefty, now you might walk him.
Yeah, right.
But he can strike people out, so I'll throw him into the mix. That sort of guy. I mean, I think again, there have been years, much like we talked about the rotation, where they just need somebody.
Yes.
This isn't really that year, I feel like, in either case. Like, there have been years when it's like, oh, they just need to trade for some, 6th-inning reliever. They just need a Michael Fulmer type.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that worked out well.
Sure.
That worked out. That's one of their better trades, actually.
You're right.
Because he was just a solid.
Him or Romo were basically the two biggest success stories at the trade deadline, right? Yeah.
Romo would be a perfect addition if we could go back 5 years with Romo. But they have guys like that. I mean, are those type of guys better than Cole Sands or better than Stallmont or better than? Now, if you could find a lefty, that would work. Although that's a much smaller pool. So yeah, I don't know. I guess I would prioritize it as, first of all, it would not shock me at all if they did nothing.
No, I agree.
For two reasons that we talked about. One is the bar to
I'd say
clear.
there's at least a 50% chance.
Yeah. the bar to clear with these upgrades is significant.
Yeah, right.
You need above average players in almost every role because you already have decent guys filling out these roles. You already have something of a roster crunch if everyone's healthy. But then beyond that,
payroll.
Money.
Yeah, right. Yep.
If they're not willing or able,
and they're not especially excited about moving prospects.
Well, yeah, they never
right,
are. But
right.
I mean, I would say they've shown a willingness to trade prospects for better or worse. It hasn't always worked out, obviously, but I just can't imagine, given all that we've seen from an ownership standpoint over the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Adding even $3 million in payroll at this stage. I suspect if they had their druthers, they would cut more payroll because their revenue is significantly lower than expectations or projections coming into the season.
That's your call? Your call is they're going to trade away.
So they're going to trade away.
They're going to be sellers
Pablo
at the trade deadline?
Yeah. No, I'll stop short of that. I'll give them some credit. That would be a hell of a thing.
That would be quite the pivot.
I'll give the Grinch some credit. And that he won't steal other holidays other than Christmas.
God.
Is that what the Grinch did? Stole Christmas?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. That's right. Are you complete tangent off of this topic? Did you see they had Sergio Romo added to the San Francisco Wall of Fame while the Twins were
Dan interviewed him and wrote about it.
That's cool.
2 days ago.
That's good.
Yeah. It was all the relievers from the World Series teams.
Yes.
Which is a nice little touch.
I like putting in 4 relievers at the same time for something like that.
Those bullpens were unbelievably good for San Francisco. That was, they had some great starting pitching, obviously, and clutch moments offensively, and Buster Posey and all that. But that was, I remember even at the time, Bochy, who's going to be a Hall of Fame manager, he's now won 4 World Series with 2 different teams, pulling strings in that bullpen. He was given so much credit, but also any string he pulled, Romo would come in, or Javier Lopez would come in, not to be confused with Jorge Lopez.
Yes.
And all the strings were good strings, so that helps too. But so I think that's the deadline outlook. But again, we're a week and a half out.
That's right.
So,
and if there's a big move, we will be covering it with an emergency podcast immediately. Usually the night that it is made, we will record an emergency podcast so you have it first thing in the morning or even late that night.
Patreon.com/Gleeman. We would love to have you join us. There are thousands of people who have joined, so you don't have to feel self-conscious. Come on and join the club. The water's warm.
Should we finish up about 15 minutes of draft talk here?
Sure. So Sunday night and then Monday and Tuesday were the draft. Why they have it during the All-Star break, I couldn't tell you.
They've moved it there over the last couple of years. Like, it's a thing.
Everyone hates it. I can tell you the writers hate it. Not that anybody should care.
Yeah.
But the teams hate it. The players hate it. The agents hate it.
I'm a little surprised
the scouts hate it.
They do it Sunday, Monday, Tuesday of the All-Star break as opposed to like Wednesday, Thursday of the All-Star break.
They also play the Futures game Sunday while games are going on.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Yeah, a lot of things don't make any sense.
A couple things I don't quite get.
I'm starting to suspect, John, that the people running baseball perhaps aren't that good at it. Now, that's controversial. I know everyone thinks Rob Manfred is a marketing genius.
Sure, yeah.
And just a saint of a man.
That's right.
But great public speaker. All the things, handsome, smells nice, all the things people say about him.
He speeded up the game nicely. I'll give him that.
He did do that, yeah.
I'll give him that.
But the Twins drafted let down. They drafted 5th last year and 8th the year before. That was a lot more fun to write about.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, drafting 21st means you're coming off a good season. So that's the trade-off.
Right. Were they even in the lottery this year?
No.
Okay. It's only the non-playoff teams, right? Yeah, okay.
So they picked
Cleveland, however, we should mention, won the lottery this year.
They won the lottery. Although it was not a great year to win the lottery. The guy they drafted, Bazana, might.
In fact, one of the questions we got on the Patreon mailbag last week was,
would Walker Jenkins have been the number 1 pick this year?
Right, which is who the Twins were drafted 5th overall last year. Would he have been the number 1 pick this year?
Now, I can't speak to who Cleveland would have specifically drafted, and they might have tried to save money by drafting someone else because the guy they drafted, only some people had as the number 1 pick this year. But I can tell you without question, Walker Jenkins would have been viewed as the consensus number 1 prospect in this draft class, where he was like between 3rd and 5th last year. But last year was a absolutely stacked monster draft. So the Twins picked 21st, which was their own pick after winning the division last year. Then they picked 33rd, which was the pick they got for Sonny Gray departing as a free agent because they made him the qualifying offer. We just discussed that earlier about pitchers. The flip side of that. Then they had their own. Was it their own pick?
They had their own pick.
60th was their own second round pick.
That's right. And then 69th was
the competitive balance pick.
Oh, that's right.
Which goes to teams with smaller market teams, basically,
that's right.
or low revenue, low
payroll teams.
Yeah, it's a little. You can game that system a little bit, but anyway, for the top 70 is pretty good.
Yes, right.
It's an opportunity. You didn't have a top 20 pick, but for the top 70 is good. You essentially had 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks.
Both in the lower half of those rounds, but still.
Right. So we can talk a little bit about the 4 guys they drafted. We should also just talk, because of the way the baseball draft is structured, having 4 picks like that in those first 2 rounds not only gets you, your choice of player in those first 2 rounds, it also provides you additional money to be able to sign players. There's a slot of money associated with each of those players, and basically what you have to do is spend your slot of money on that. There's always a lot of confusion. I suspect Cleveland, we'll see when he ends up signing the number 1 pick, but I suspect he's going to get less than the number 2 pick got. It's not to say they wouldn't have drafted him number 1 overall anyway, but part of the equation is they try to save sometimes money. If we can sign this guy for $7 million instead of $8.5 million, we have another $1.5 million, and there's always confusion. People go, "Oh, they're being cheap." Teams spend 100% of what their pool of spending is. Right. But if you can get the first guy for $7 million instead of $8.5 million, you have another $1.5 million that you can use to lure your second
pick.
Which is
what Cleveland
pick.
Looks like they did. Right. They ended up drafting a guy like at 80 that was probably ranked 20. Right.
The teams have done that successfully a lot, and it's always the Twins do that. Occasionally.
That's right.
And people are like, "Oh, they're pocketing the money." No, they're spending 100% of the money. Right. But basically, you take all your draft picks, and like you said, each pick has a slot recommended bonus amount. You add up all your picks. In this case, they had 22 picks, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
You add up the slot recommended amount for all 22 picks, and that's your bonus pool.
Right.
You could give that to 5 players if you want.
That's right.
Then you just wouldn't. There's some penalties involved if you go over on certain guys, but you just wouldn't have other to spend. Or you can try to sort of, for instance, save money on your first pick. Then someone who had dropped because their bonus demands were high, maybe they were a top 10 talent, but nobody wanted to pay them top 10 money.
And now they're by the time pick 25 comes around and they haven't been picked, nobody's going to pick them because they don't have money to sign that person.
But you've conserved money,
but you've saved money, so you can draft them even at 30.
I don't think the Twins have done that this year. I think
it looks like
1 or 2 of these guys might get below slot bonuses, and they might have to spread it around to get the high school kid they drafted in their 4th pick,
right? That's right,
Dason Hill. So maybe that's a factor. We'll see when the numbers come out. I don't think it was a significant factor. I think these were, in terms of relative to baseball, these were fairly straight up picks. We'll see. So their first pick, number 21 overall, is Kalen Culpepper. He told us, we talked to him on Zoom the night of the draft, and he said I guess he goes by KC.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
I'm going to do the math on that and just say those are his initials.
Yeah.
But Kalen Culpepper, good Culpepper state to join athletically.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Not only Dante, but the Twins, one of their better pitching prospects is named CJ Culpepper. They drafted a couple years ago.
Also initials.
Yeah. True. I don't know what Dante's DJ Culpepper. I don't know what Dante Culpepper's middle name was. Shortstop from Kansas State. Smaller, 6 foot, 190. Played third base his first 2 years at Kansas State. They had a really good shortstop who was drafted. Then when that guy got drafted, he moved to shortstop last year. Got pretty good reviews at shortstop. He's one of those guys who opinions vary in terms of will he be a shortstop by the time he gets to AAA or the majors. Yeah. But he's got some chance to stick there. Good arm, so people think if he has to move to third or something like that, he'll be good there. But the bat is really what they want. I mean, he was really good his first year at Kansas State for a freshman. And then just back-to-back, like sort of identical monster years where he hit 330 with good walk rate and tons of power.
And then he seemed to turn it up even higher in the postseason and when he was playing with Team USA.
Right.
Put up some monster numbers.
What's interesting about him playing with Team USA, the U.S. National Collegiate Team, the head coach of that team is Brooks Lee's dad,
right, yeah.
Larry Lee, who's been the longtime coach at Cal Poly, which is where Brooks Lee played. And so Sean Johnson, who we also talked to on draft night, who's the Twins scouting director, I think his title now is Vice President of Amateur Scouting or something, but he's the scouting director. He said, well, it's great because we can ask Larry Lee for scouting reports. Yeah. Not just, is this guy good, but...
Well, he ended up having, I think, probably the best year of anybody on Team USA. Or the best.
He led the team in
everything, right? So, not too shockingly, Mr. Lee thought highly.
Sure, but they also said glowing reports about him as a person.
Right.
And even just talking to him, he's a very upbeat, kid.
Yeah.
I say that as... I didn't used to call draft picks kids, but now I'm double his age.
Sure,
so,
you are. Yeah.
Right.
They call you grandpa. You
and
might
I
as well call them
200-year-old spine, so I'm allowed to call anyone kid at this point.
Exactly right.
So, right-handed bat, I think the goal with him, and this is going to be a pattern with both of their first two picks, and in general, I would say over the last several years, I think they're valuing kind of bat-to-ball skill and kind of raw swing characteristics,
I think so too.
With the idea that you can do one or both of two things once you get that guy into your system. One is develop more power.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting beyond that is develop kind of not necessarily overall plate discipline, but like lower their chase rate on off-speed stuff. Yeah. Because now that you have more data on that than you used to have 5-10 years ago, you can look at a guy like Culpepper and say, great numbers, just murdered the Big 12, but he swung at a lot of sliders in the dirt.
I thought the same thing. When people see the draft and they don't really know that much about baseball or about the baseball draft, they'll see things like, oh, they kept drafting shortstops. What do we get more shortstops for? We got all these shortstops. Right? They're kind of they're viewing it in the same way that people view like the NFL draft, right? Which is sort of like, hey, they're drafting for at least a portion of need, right?
Or NBA, it's like, why do they keep drafting centers?
Right. Yeah. The reality is for the Major League Baseball draft, and I think at least what you're seeing from the Twins, and I think you see this from other organizations as well. They draft what they think they can develop.
Right.
And in this case, if for the first, I would say that the Twins' early picks show one of two things. The first is this draft was the strength of this draft was supposed to be, college hitters. That's what was in abundance. That was what was available.
But also they lean into that anyway.
Sure.
In general.
Exactly right. Yeah. And so by all means, then go get yourself some college hitters. Right. Then specifically within the college hitters, you saw at least with the first two picks, these guys are guys who can hit the ball in the zone on a regular basis. Now, not necessarily pop it for a lot of power,
but high contact. So their second pick, named Kyle DeBarge, Louisiana Lafayette, shortstop, even smaller, 5'9", 165 pounds. He hit 20 homers in college, but he's super high contact rate.
Right.
I think he struck out like 9% of his plate appearances, which is
he's Luis Ariz-ish.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Right-handed hitter, plays shortstop. Probably a better college shortstop than Culpepper, but his weakness is more arm strength, so he might end up at second base. Yeah. But like you said, these are both stylistically, I think, fairly similar guys where they're on the smaller side, so you're hoping to develop power beyond just looking at him and going, well, that guy's not a power hitter.
Well, especially when they have to start playing with wooden bats.
Right. And then defensively, we talk about this every year because they draft shortstops a lot.
Right.
All teams draft shortstops a lot. And it's always like...
By the way, it's paying off this year.
Well, yeah. I mean, Brooks Lee was a shortstop.
Right, yeah.
But so many guys, particularly out of high school when you're 17, think back to the best player on your high school team. It was probably the shortstop. Right. Now, that didn't mean that guy was destined to play in the majors as a shortstop. Miguel Sano was signed as a shortstop.
Sure.
I mean, Michael Kadire was drafted as a shortstop. Because everyone is the best... If you're a first round or even just drafted, you're going to be the best player on your high school team, and the best player on the team plays shortstop. Right. But as Nick Gordon was a shortstop. Right. Even at AAA, he was a shortstop. But just because these guys played shortstop in college doesn't mean they're going to have any shot to wind up at shortstop, or that's even part of the draft equation. They want these guys for their bats and the fact that they're going to have some level of defensive value or flexibility. They're not going to be a first baseman or a DH. They could be a shortstop, center field, second base, third base, utility man, something like that.
Probably outfield if they want. Yeah, right.
So two relatively similar players. You're going to want us. They're basically hoping to start with the baseline of bat to ball skills, hand-eye coordination, good swings, high-end college production. They were really good college hitters.
Yeah.
But you're hoping that, and they hit for good power in college, but there's skepticism because of their size. You're hoping that either they hit for such a high average and hit enough doubles that the home run power is just sort of secondary, or you can tap into some significant power. I mean, I'm personally not like, okay, yeah, is it easier for a 6'6" guy to become a power hitter than a 5'9" guy? Yeah. But we should be past the point where that's a huge factor. Right. I mean,
well, and then with the third
there's tons of small guys
and
who
with
hit
the third
for power.
pick, they pivoted to power.
Well, right. So
right.
With the third pick,
they also got an infielder, but this
which
one
was
is a little
60th
different
overall.
Profile. Yeah.
They got one of the premier sort of grip it and rip it, high strikeout, low average sluggers in college baseball, which is Billy Amick, who was the third baseman for Tennessee, who won the College World Series. Right. Just a stacked Tennessee team.
Right.
And just unbelievable team. He played third base in college. He's not going to be a third baseman. I mean, he's probably going to be a first base DH type of guy. But
I've heard a little bit of both, but yes.
He ain't going to play third base. I mean, he might play some third base, but he's a big right-handed power hitter. Just, the prototypical, probably going to hit 250, but he might hit 35 homers. High-end success, obviously, for a College World Series winning team. So, yeah, he was an interesting contrast to the first two picks.
Right, yeah.
But again, a high-end, very productive college hitter.
Well, yeah, what you've got there now is a guy, still somebody that maybe that in terms of like teaching people not to chase, if they think that is one of their strengths, that is going to be part of his
thing. Is more just like swing and miss, I think, versus what he's swinging at. But yeah, it could be part of it. I mean, the problem, you look at college stats, and no good hitters strike out a lot in college. Right. But it's relative. It's all relative.
Sure.
His strikeout rate in college is actually very high for a good, highly drafted hitter.
Yeah.
It's just not high compared to overall because the guys who strike out in college are just not good. But yeah, he struck out like once a game, I think, in college, which you start to then have that translate to like AA, AAA, the majors. That's going to be a lot. So that's his player profile. But again, certainly in terms of raw power, and he's a guy who put up big numbers at Clemson and then transferred to Tennessee for his last year.
Yeah, right.
And hit 23 homers for the College World Series winners. And then their fourth pick, number 69, which was a comp pick, like we said, they pivoted entirely to a left-handed high school pitcher. From Texas named Dason Hill. I suspect he's going to cost more than the slot to sign, but we'll see. I would expect all these guys to sign. I don't think they're at the point.
I don't think
given
they're
rules,
not gambling on that.
No,
these
the
guys,
Twins
right?
especially. I mean, nobody really does that anymore. Very rare for a guy to not sign because they know what all these guys want before they draft them. Right. I mean, it's not a secret. They're negotiating. So
they kind of went back up the draft board a little, like what we were talking about before. Yeah.
So Hill is a guy who probably one of the top 5 high school pitchers in the draft, I would say, or certainly lefties. Pretty good velocity now, but he's like 6'6". He weighs, as far as I was told, he weighs about 90 pounds.
Well, he's also somebody that at the beginning of this college, at the beginning of this high school season, was not necessarily viewed as somebody who was going to be a big major league. He was assumed he was going to be moving on to college for a while. He was not perceived as being one of these high things, and he's put on a couple extra miles per hour this year.
And they feel like certainly as he fills out, I mean, they've been pretty good at this, which brings me to their strategy after the 4 top 70 picks that we just talked about.
Yeah, 5 through 20.
Then
2.
For their last, 15 picks or whatever it was, they took like 12 right-handed college starting pitchers.
Right.
And we've talked about this in the past. I mean, the majority of their best pitching prospects, whether it's Festa, Sebby Matthews, CJ Culpepper, we talked about Andrew Morris, going back to like
Bailey Ober.
Yeah. Right-handed college starting pitchers. I'll take it a step further. Typically, they're pretty tall, and sometimes skinny when drafted.
And
Not always,
and come from a college.
Come from non-powerhouse colleges.
Yeah, right.
And the Twins have found a lot of success, and I think this is going to become very apparent over the next 2 or 3 years as some of the guys we mentioned really start making it to the majors.
Yeah.
But even with Ober, they did it. Taking these guys who were good but not great in college, smoothing out the mechanics, getting them on strength and conditioning programs, tweaking this, tweaking that, getting them from throwing 91 to throwing 95, or in Sebby Matthews' case, 97, and kind of creating prospects from raw clay in college that was, mid-round picks. And that's not a strategy that they're alone with. The Rays essentially do that. Cleveland does that. Some of the best pitching teams do that.
I mean, if you can do that, it's incredibly valuable.
So the Twins have kind of taken it so that if you look at their last several drafts, they've gone very position player heavy early.
Yeah.
And then you get to a point like after the first 75 or 100 picks, then you just draft all the college pitching you can, and then you try to just take them all and you change all their mechanics. You get some weight on them, and you try to get one or two of them to kind of burst through, throwing 95 instead of 90. And so we'll see. They've had a lot of success with that in recent years. So I would say that's the strategy. They went 3 college hitters, a high school pitcher, and then a million right-handed college
a couple
starting
catchers mixed in there. But
well, somebody's got to catch all those right-handed college pitchers. It's like in spring training, people are always like, they invited like 9 catchers. It's like, who do you think catches all these bullpen sessions? Somebody's got to do it. So that was the draft. I think there's only like 2 weeks period for these guys to sign. I would expect all of them to sign. That's right. And they'll probably all debut, I would guess. So we'll have some more on those. We don't have time to talk about, but I did like a mid-season. Maybe we'll talk about it on.
Let's talk about Patreon
Monday. I did a mid-season top 20 prospects update.
Yes.
Adding in not only the draft picks, but like the first half breakout guys and all that. And I had Culpepper 8th and DeBarge 13th, I want to say.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Now,
the other 2 didn't make the top 20.
No, although I could have put them at 19, 20, something like that. Right. I didn't really want to. I had just written about all 4 of them.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's tough. It's tough. I would have probably put the high school.
Well, in general, I talked about this last year with Walker Jenkins. I was the only person who didn't immediately make Walker Jenkins
their
number one prospect, in part because Brooks Lee was a really good prospect.
Sure.
But I talked about it at the time. I want to do the lemon test.
Yeah, I get it.
What I mean by that is sometimes you buy a car and you drive it off the lot and it craps out a block away.
Down,
Sometimes Keone Cavaco, let's say, was the 13th pick. They sent him to rookie ball and he hit 170.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to rank the guy any higher than you need to until you see that. Now, Walker Jenkins passed the lemon test like day 1.
Right, exactly. Yes. Right.
So by my regular one in January, he was the number 1 prospect.
Sure.
Same thing with Culpepper. Like, I'm certain some people would rank him as their 5th best prospect or their 3rd best prospect or whatever, although their top 5 is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
But me, I'm like, I actually would have leaned towards lower than higher than 8th. In my mind, 8th was me ranking him pretty highly, in part because he's a college player, so it's not like they're drafting a high schooler.
Right.
But I want to see some evidence from recent draftees because the truth is a non-insignificant percentage of even first-round picks stink right away.
That's right.
Or just not stink, but just aren't
immediately raise questions.
Right.
That's right.
And so why are we ranking these
start
guys?
seeing their flaws immediately.
There's no need to rank them higher. It's not like if they don't get ranked high enough, they get out of the organization or something. So that's the approach I take with that. But we'll maybe talk more about that. And like you said, Zebby Matthews got promoted from AA to AAA. I had him 5th.
We'll probably talk about that on Monday since we've only got 2 Milwaukee Brewers games to talk about on Monday.
It's a good because it does relate to the trade deadline in that if they're going to be trading for guys, the top 20 prospects are the names that they're going to start to get calls about.
You can check that out if you sign up at patreon.com/Gleeman. We'd love to have you on board for the last 2 weeks here before the trade deadline. I think we've got 4 scheduled ones. Let's throw in an emergency one on top of that, and maybe you'll be in for $5 for the rest of the rest of the month.
The Tarek Skubal emergency podcast will really hit
for
hard.
this free podcast. Let's thank all of our sponsors: Factor Meals, Beckett's, Uptown. Check out the Twins Daily event there. Game Time and BetterHelp. And above them all, let's give a special thank to our presenting sponsor, our new presenting sponsor, Black Stag Brewing. Check out their Where to Buy page on their website to find out where you can buy their beer and THC products near you. And we will talk to you next Friday.
Gleeman